I'll call this special regional council meeting to order. Please be advised that today's meeting is being recorded and streamed on a publicly accessible website, and please respect social distancing at this time. I have some additions to the agenda regarding a letter regarding the enhanced medical travel that's been put in place, and a letter regarding the provincial parks. So I'll ask for a motion to adopt the agenda. Moved by Councillor Roper, seconded by Councillor Andrews. All those in favor? Carried. Adoption of the minutes of the Special Regional Council meeting of April 7th, 2020. I have a motion to adopt those minutes. Moved by Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Roper. All those in favor? Carried. Business arising, outstanding items, the coronavirus. CAO's verbal update. Mr. Barry.
Thank you, Mayor. Starting today, we'll be transitioning to gain updates from the EOC, so our Emergency Operations Center. I'll still provide verbal updates as required as we move forward, but the majority of the information will start now coming from the Emergency Operations Center, and updates will occur minimally on a bi-weekly basis. If more information or if there's a significant amount of information or something that's pertinent needs to be reported, then it'll be done obviously at a higher frequency. Essentially, the summaries would be a summary of the EOC situation reports that use to track and update the EOC's activities. Some other updates here: the weekly meetings that were occurring with the Minister of Affairs and Housing, Minister Selena Robinson, are now occurring every other week or bi-weekly. So there's no meeting this week, and it'll resume next week. And something that Regional Council might wish to consider also moving forward after we get past the budget processes is you might look at reducing the current meeting frequency of twice a week to once a week. Just something for Council to consider if they wish. And then one last update outside the COVID issues are just regarding the river access and the incident from last week. Just for an update for Council. The various agencies met yesterday, so us as the NRM, the Ministry of Forest Lands, Natural Resources, Operations and Rural Development, FLNRO for short, Public Works Canada, RCMP, Northern Rockies Fire Rescue, Search and Rescue, discussed yesterday the collectively the current access to the river, as it's still vehicle access is still restricted to the Muskwa River via the bridge area, and of course with the P3 bridges on the Sid Road. There's still some concerns around public safety and potential some significant ice upriver, and of course there's still a vehicle that's on the beach down there that's trapped in the ice. The two pickup trucks were removed over the weekend, but that one vehicle is still down there trapped in the ice in the beach. So as such, all the parties have agreed to continue to restrict access to the river, and access being vehicle access temporarily. We're going to reconvene and meet again as a group on Thursday to reevaluate the situation. Just as FYI, the area falls under the jurisdiction of FLNRO, so as the access to the beach is through untenured Crown land. So, and we are currently either it's been posted or in the process of being posted. A joint message is being posted on our website and Facebook page. With that, I'll hand over the EOC update and reports to Aaron.
Mrs. Laval.
Thank you, Mayor. Can everybody hear me all right?
Yep.
Okay. So as contained in Admin 29, so Admin 29 is just providing Council with some background information as to what is being conducted through the Emergency Operations Center. So the Emergency Operations Center is taking care of three sort of areas of tasks. The first one is anything that falls under one of the provincial orders that were given under the Emergency Program Act. And second is the continued delivery of essential municipal service. So those are the water, sewer, roads, airport, governance, and communications. And the third is any tasks that are assigned through a regional council direction. Things such as requests for public Wi-Fi or additional supports to residents or businesses during this time. So those three areas are going to be covered and responded to through an EOC report. So the EOC report is laid out similar to what's known as a situation report, and it divides into three categories. So we have current objectives. So those are the current objectives for what's known as an operational period. And then it falls into future objectives. So things that the EOC will be undertaking at some point in the future or is currently just starting. And then there is a completed objectives. So items that have been completed and are now either underway or have been delivered. Within each of those areas, you'll notice that we've divided it up into essential services. So this is that water, sewer, roads, governance, communications. Anything that we would consider that falls into a community measures or outreach category. So these would be anything that would help residents or continued service for residential supports or anything like that. And then the other category is business measures and outreach. And a lot of these are going to be things done in conjunction with the Chamber of Commerce to help support our local businesses. In addition, on the bottom, we've just included from the last operational period some key federal, provincial, and health updates, and as well as some local updates or local information on the local state of things. So, for instance, the highway closure, Northwest Tel's announcement about temporary internet usage relief, and things that may be useful to know, such as Fort St. John Airport service reductions. Did council have any questions on anything in the report?
There I am. Sorry, everybody.
Welcome, Councillor Penny. Councillor Gerwing, did you have a question?
I do. I'm not sure exactly which part of the report it's in, but there was mention about recycling options. I think it was maybe in the future objectives. And I'm so very grateful to see that being included, as I had 3 people contact me this weekend wondering what we were doing about that and what options they have, because they're currently unable to stockpile anymore and they're now sending it to the landfill, which is very upsetting for them. So if and when we have any information to share on that, I would be most interested in receiving that.
Thank you. Any other questions? Very well. Did you want to continue?
Sure. So council may have noticed there are 2 attachments to this report. So the current attachment, one is outlining in more detail the community measures and outreach, and the other one is the business measures and outreach. If a particular topic requires more detail, or we feel that it has a broader depth to it, we'll just attach that in a supplemental report to keep the cover report pretty brief and point form and easy to read. So if you're looking for more information, it may be in a supplemental report, but by reading the cover report, you should get a good broad view of the current situation.
Any other questions? Very well, is that it? Okay, thank you very much. Admin report number 28, operations of regional parks 2020. Mr. Woodland, would you like to speak to that?
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. We went out to look and see what other areas were doing for their campgrounds, and we took the lead of the province and the federal government on what they are currently holding to for what their use of parks are or not use. And we had given that information to council for their consideration. Currently, we have gone out and checked our parks and made sure they are ready for this year's camping season if it does occur. Today, we're removing dangerous trees in the Andy Bailey area. So if council wishes to proceed with opening, or if they wish to leave them closed currently, we can facilitate that at council's direction.
Mr. Barry?
Thank you. And just to add to that, Mayor and Council, so the report in front of you is for decision, and if council did elect to look at opportunities to open the parks during this time, then we would follow that up with another report to council outlining what some of the restrictions would look like and different options and potential capacity that would be required to maintain the parks. Based on our correspondence with the province, there's no direction to province not to open them. Besides, obviously, we know that all the BC parks are currently closed, and rec sites with camping abilities are not accessible or are closed. But with that being said, the direction of the province is that if, like private campgrounds, if the regional campground was to be open, then we obviously would have to follow the restrictions that are in place in the directives from the province and the health minister. So if council did wish to look at having the campgrounds open, we would follow this report up with another one just outlining what that would look like.
Okay, thank you. Comments on this, Councillor Penny?
Just wondering about, with Andy Bailey, I know that we have camping areas out there. I've never really known exactly what the restrictions are. Do we allow camping out there, or does it just we turn a blind eye to it?
We allow camping out there, Councillor Penny. Mostly it's on the lower half of that camping area, close to the beach access. Sometimes there is a little bit of an overflow and the top road also gets utilized. It's a more grassy area, better for tenting and such. But we do have a fee we charge there for nightly stays. I believe it's $17 currently to help offset the maintenance of that area.
And then, Scott, as you were saying, if it was a decision that we wanted to open these, then there would have to be another report then on going forward on how we could maintain safe distances and that sort of thing, I guess.
Yeah, what we didn't do, to be honest with you, is until we got some guidance from council, we didn't want to spend a bunch of staff capacity at this point looking at what that would look like, because there's some guidelines the province of Alberta put forward with a lot of their private campgrounds and regional campgrounds that some good guidance. There's been nothing that we're aware of at this point specific from the province of BC, with the exception of the general guidelines around mass gatherings and social distancing and things of that nature. What we would do is look at the two areas. If, for instance, if both areas of council had a desire to look at options to keep both areas or to open both areas, being Tetsa and Andy Bailey, what we would do is then we would get a little deeper under the hood of it and look at what those restrictions would look like and come back to council for with some specific information, and at the same time just probably a little bit more communication back and forth with the province just to confirm that the direction that we're taking as an organization is adequate. And then the other concern, obviously, or I wouldn't say concern per se, but the other thing we'd have to keep in mind is the enforcement component. So, Tetsa, for example, I mean, some discussions and things, for instance, like the province of Alberta is doing is washroom facilities are closed and cook shacks are closed, playgrounds closed, things of that nature. And then they have minimum guidelines in terms of distance apart between various campsites. So when you look at Tetsa, there's a couple double campsites. So there's a potential that a couple of those one of those would not be one campsite that's in a double site, for example, wouldn't be accessible, had to be restricted. And then given the current process and how we manage or operate those campsites, Andy Bailey is self-register and looked after from just a maintenance perspective from the rec employees, but no camp attendant on site. And then the one up at Tetsa has a camp attendant, but it's not your typical BC Park camp attendant. It's more of a hybrid system where it's a self-registration. The camp attendant looks after the maintaining the campsite in terms of stocking of the pit toilets and cleanliness in areas, and then of course general maintenance. So just if there was if we did look at opening those campgrounds, then we would also have to consider how do we ensure that the restrictions that are put in place are being followed. So that would be another consideration too, which we would outline in that report if we were to bring a report back to council based on council's direction.
I would definitely like to see us go further with figuring it out. I mean, the locals definitely want to get out more, and even if Andy Bailey, if we end up keeping it as a day use only and just put up signs and whatever, but however the report comes out. But anyway, I'm going to be in favor of opening up both these sites.
Councillor Goodwin?
Yeah, I'm very much in favor of opening them up for sure. I was also wondering, and I'm sure this would be contained in the report further coming, but I'm thinking that if we could keep it for residents' use in terms of camping, and we currently have a reservation system in place for Tetsa, and perhaps we could do that for Andy Bailey as well. And then that will ensure that, you know, that you reserve your site and then it's there, and then if it's 5 sites or 15 sites, when they're booked, then they're booked.
Yesterday, I reached out to several of the chairs of regional districts across Northern Health's area. Specifically, I was asking them about their desire to open up the provincial parks, but the conversations were pretty wide-ranging, and they discussed issues like these small campgrounds and, you know, why private campgrounds were open and public ones were not, et cetera, and their consensus or their opinions more or less were that these sites should be opened up, and I'll speak more to that in a little while, but there does seem to be some inconsistency in where you can camp and where you can't camp. Some of those regional directors had brought up the point that if you close your provincial campgrounds, you've got camping on Crown land, et cetera, and you've got campers all over the place, and it's probably better that they're kept in one location. Is there any more comments on this? Would you like to make a motion then, Councillor Penny?
Yes, and unfortunately, I can't open up my my package here for some reason, so I don't know exactly what the suggestion was there, but
I can help you with
remember.
that if you want. It's that the
All right, well,
NRM,
Councillor Gerling, then would you like to make the motion?
for sure, that the NRM regional parks to be open to the public, and that staff be directed to provide a subsequent report on additional considerations required for opening the parks during the COVID-19 pandemic.
I'll second that.
Councillor Penny, how would you feel about seconding that motion?
I just did.
Okay, we move or seconder. All those in favor? Carried. Thank you. Emergency operations update and council reporting for information. I've got some, I guess we'll move on to the budget. If that's okay, Mr. Berry, and we'll discuss the parks at the end under new business.
Yeah, sure. I wasn't sure if there's admin 29 was for information. Anyway, if there's no questions, then by all means we can move on to the recreation budget.
Any questions on 29? Very well. We'll move on to the budget then. Analysis of changes to the Recreation Center's budget. Mr. Woodland.
I'll leave it, Mayor, if I may.
Very well.
So just what we've done here is obviously made some adjustments, and council has seen the adjustments, and it's a bit of a moving target due to the fact that we don't know when the rec facility is going to open. So the budget you see in front of you is based on the rec center being closed until May 15th. Obviously, there's no decision to open it on May 16th. It's just it was a number that was used, or a date that was used as part of a developing the amended budget for the rec facility. So based on that date and based on where we are today, if the facility were to reopen on the 16th, we would look at a savings from an expense perspective of $181,000. And then overall net tax requirements change. So an additional savings and expenses outside of what the original budget was of $181,000. And then the difference between net tax requirements is about $120,000. So the difference between the two being obviously we've accounted for lost revenues within that budget also. For information purposes, if council were to look at changing the date, potential date, that would change the budget somewhere approximately anywhere from $60,000 to $70,000 per week. And of course, it remains at that date. And if the rec center were to remain closed past the 15th and we left the budget the way it is, then of course we would still see those savings based on what our actual budget would be versus, our budget would be versus the actual expenses. So that's basically it. And of course, we can walk through the budget. I was going to see if council has any questions. Because again, the May 15th date was just based on a number that we looked at when we were developing this to get some to keep the goalposts, I guess, in a specific spot. But by all means, if council wish, they can look at amending or changing that date too. It's entirely up to council for discussion.
Any questions, councilors, on this? Very well, we'll move on to the budget then.
Okay. So I'll pass it over to Harv here shortly. So you're under colored tab 6 and small tab 27. Harv will do a quick summary of the operating process of what's happening with the budget, and then jump into some of the numbers.
Okay. Thank you very much. Our 2020 numbers, as you can see in the departmental summary, we were under budget by 7% in the wages, 15% in services. The services are our where we put try to mitigate the risk of having equipment breakdown. We didn't have as many breakdowns or issues last year, so we realized more savings inside of that budget. Our supplies budget, we were under by 1%, and utilities were under by 20% last year. For an overall under budget of 18% in 2019 of what we had budgeted last year in March. This year, with the changes that we have made during the COVID-19 event, we have gone down in wages of 4% this year. Our services, we went down by 4%. Supplies, we have gone down 7%, and that's with the addition of materials taken out over the last several weeks. And utilities, we have dropped by 14% as well. For a total this year of 16% difference in budget as opposed to the 2019. Any questions on any of that?
Excellent job of bringing this under budget this year by 18%, Mr. Wynn. Thank you. Go ahead.
So jumping into tab 27, you'll see what the departmental operations summary for the rec department will be, and it'll outline where we are for this year's number.
Are there any questions?
Keep moving forward. Okay.
Yeah, so you can move forward.
Okay, I'll jump. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, you can move forward now and go into 28 and
28.
do the capital budget.
Okay.
And then once we get past, we can get a council resolution for the capital budget. And then when we go to 29, the green sheet would look after all the operations. Well, the new green sheet would look after all the operations.
Do we want a motion here for the capital budget project for $20,000 for the sound system? Tab 28.
Yes, unless council has any questions, then we can.
Councilors, I ask for a motion to accept the 2020 capital budget request of $20,000 for the sound system.
Second.
Moved by Councilor Roper, seconded by Councilor Gerwin. All those in favor? Carried.
And we did receive a grant on that as well, councilors and mayor, of 13,500. So realize back to the municipality will be a cost of around 6,500 in total when it's all said and done.
Great.
Tab 29.
So in tab 29, the breakdown of our revenue, which we have reduced with the loss of events and such that happened or would have happened in March, April, and up to and including the 15th of May, which is things like the trade show, the Rotary auction, Northern Lights Festival piece, the Young Living event. There was some of our regular bingos and stuff like that had to be canceled. So those revenues and also our programming, there was a loss in revenues there. Then our expenses, of course, we did reduce the wages. We did go down in the contract services and the materials and utilities again. Utilities are at an actual right now, but with the ability probably to realize more savings as we keep going forward. Our light bill has gone from 12,500 kilowatts when the ice plant was running mid-March to just over 2,800 kilowatts a day currently. The biggest savings, because there's absolutely nothing on except for the mechanicals, keeping them on their presence there so the air in the building is still circulating a little bit every day. When that's all said and done, we get to a net tax requirement of $6.1 million, which is down, I think, 120,000 over what was originally would have come to council back in March.
Okay, are there any questions, councilors? Hearing none, I'll ask for a motion to accept the budget of the rec center. Moved by Councilor Roper, seconded by Councilor Penny. All those in favor? And that's carried.
And Mayor, sorry, just to confirm, just the documents that you're approving are the ones that are on the bottom say the revised April 22nd, so when that was in your agenda package.
Very well. Information package of April 15th, 2020, and information package for council for April 22nd, 2020 are received. The additions to the agenda, I have two. Premier Horgan had announced the enhanced medical travel where they were purchasing fixed-wing aircraft, several ambulances, some helicopters to enhance medical transportation into and out of remote areas. I wanted to write a letter to Premier Horgan saying that we appreciate those enhanced medical travel facilities, but that we want and we expect that they will stay in place after the COVID-19 pandemic. I think this is, of course, in keeping with the council's desire to get better and more efficient air transportation for citizens into and out of the north. So I haven't, that letter is being written now, but I'm providing information to council on that unless there's an objection. Councillor Andrews.
Did we want to see if Chief Gale and their council wanted to be on that letter as well?
I could do that. I would reach out to them and see if they wanted to be included. Yes, I'll do that. Councillor Grilling.
Could the letter also include some sort of wording around whether it's an inquiry or a request that some of this enhanced transportation piece is located in Northern Rockies?
I think I could probably do something like that. We would like to see those. I'm not exactly sure what the vision is for them. They've just sort of announced this now.
Well, they've also announced that this funding will stay in place after COVID-19. So I think that it would be, I would like to see some commitment on their part, or at least some information as to how this is being rolled out and if in fact Northern Rockies will see any of it.
Okay, the letter I had envisioned on writing was simply to recognize that the province had brought in these elements during COVID-19, and that the expectation was that they would stay in place for remote and rural areas throughout British Columbia without getting too far into the weeds about how many ambulances we're getting, which fixed-wing aircraft is going where, and which helicopters are going to be designated to which areas. It was more of a letter just stating that we expect those facilities to stay in place for rural and remote areas. I can put something in there, asking, that Fort Nelson or the Northern Rockies be included in their plans, but I think when they say rural and remote areas, I think we are included in their transportation issues.
Well, Mayor, if I may, when they contracted with the plane in Fort St. John for patient transfers, that was supposed to ease the medical transportation issue in Northern Rockies, and it never did. And so that is my concern, is that, well, I appreciate more resources being dispersed to Northern Health. I think I would like some sort of answers as to how that is directly going to ease any of the burden of patient transfer or medevacs for Northern Rockies.
Ms. McIver?
So I just want to integrate some input. So some weeks ago on a Northern Health stakeholder call, there was early indication that they were going to roll out this program for critical care transport and these enhancements. And so we reached out internally at that point to say, basically all of the points you've raised, Councillor Gerwing, about what about Fort Nelson, and we've experienced challenges for years, and those will only be exacerbated in a crisis situation. We reminded them that we do have a fixed wing operator that has in past years been a relied upon resource for BCEHS, and so the communication that we had with the patient transfer network and BCEHS was really positive. So there was a commitment to connect with our local operator, and since now that they've announced that there's additional resource allocation, we followed up again to confirm whether those resources would be allocated. They just didn't have that information at that time. But the dialogue that we've been having with this individual at Patient Transfer Network has been really positive, and he's well aware of our community's issues and concerns, and he'd actually committed to coming in June to meet with the Community Health Plan Steering Committee and our local physicians and our hospital staff to basically get under the hood of the problems that we're having, whether that's, availability of resource issue or whether that's a process issue with PTN. So, we'll definitely stay in contact with them and confirm that we want that conversation to continue for lasting impact for the community.
Right, and I knew that those, and I know and I appreciate the advocacy work that the Community Health Plan and staff have been doing. And I think we had some sort of a report on those conversations, and that's why I wanted something to be included in the letter to the premiers, so that we're advocating from at a staff level with emergency services, but I believe we also need to continue to advocate from to the premier as well.
Okay, I was thinking that, when we're talking about these detailed conversations that Ms. McIver is talking about here, the letter that I was going to write was not going to be anything as detailed. That's more of a staff level to staff of the Northern Health. Than it is from me. All I was going to do was talk about the fact that these facilities were being made available and that we wanted to continue to have them available after COVID-19.
And I don't think I'm requesting specific details, Mayor, not to continue to flog a dead horse, but I think that just the broad mention of how will this impact Northern Rockies is all I'm requesting. And if you don't think that that's appropriate, then so be it.
Okay. Are there any other comments? Okay, moving on, I'll discuss the provincial park issue. Several of the chairs of the PRD had brought up the issue of provincial parks being opened. And specifically, they were concerned that campers were going onto Crown land and camping and lighting fires throughout the Crown land. And they wanted these campers to be more focused on the provincial campgrounds or the provincial parks. So the issue came up a couple of times. So I reached out to the chairs, as I had said before, of the different regional districts to see what their feelings were. This was, they hadn't gone to their boards, of course, so I was just getting an idea of where they were sitting. And the chairs more or less were of the opinion that with having the private campgrounds opened, that they were more inclined to see those provincial parks open than closed. So with that in mind, I was going to write to Minister Robinson just to say that throughout the Northern Rockies, it's our desire to have those provincial parks open sooner rather than later. And I want to get council's opinion on that.
Sooner the better. As far as I'm concerned, sooner the better.
Okay, Councillor Souls, and any other comments on that? Councillor Andrews.
So are we talking about the provincial campgrounds or the provincial parks, as in like being able to go out hiking in the backcountry?
Well, I think, Councillor Penny, did you have something?
After you're done, yeah.
I was referring to the provincial parks, which are closed, but this could extend to provincial campgrounds as well. And I just wanted to get council's ideas on this, whether they're in favor of having these opened or not. Okay. Both of them.
Yeah,
Councillor Penny.
I'm a little fearful right now watching the highway and seeing how many travelers are still coming. I'm astounded actually at what is happening at the border. I mean, we're being told it's essential travel only, but I'm seeing travel in both directions, much similar than I see every year at this time. And without these campgrounds open and they're allowed to camp on crown land, I'm quite concerned on where this could lead when it comes to forest fires and that sort of thing for us to deal with so many people traveling the highway and they're just going to find their own places to camp. So I'd much prefer to see our campgrounds open.
So many of those regional directors had different issues with the campground. So for instance, in some regions where you've got forestry camps, for instance, or people who use the campgrounds and work as tree planters or whatever, they had issues with that. I think in Prince Rupert, they're concerned about tourism. They don't want to see a large influx of people coming to their area, so they had some concerns about that as well. Any other comments? Councillor Andrews.
Well, that's a concern of mine too, is having all these people from out of town, out of our area. I think better route would be to find a way to open these only to people in our area, so we can at least enjoy our backcountry and separate more. There's more distance we can get between each other if we can go out and enjoy our parks in the Northern Rockies than if we get to stay in Fort Nelson Townside area. But I don't want to have to be sharing it with a bunch of people who are traveling through. I think we've got to have restrictions in place somewhere, and I just don't know exactly where that would come from.
I think ideally that would be great. I just don't know in practical terms whether you can exclude someone from an area simply because they are not from that area. Last, Mr. Barry, maybe he can comment on that. whether or not it's possible to exclude people who are not from Northern Rockies.
For BC parks, it wouldn't be us, but for the campgrounds, there's some guidelines we can put in, but we would have to confirm what we can and can't do. The challenge becomes how would we do it, and how do we enforce it? One of the things that was brought up as part of the regional campgrounds, which could be done, is if it's a reservation only, the reservations, so that there's no drop-in camping. So that helps us, would help us manage potentially the amount of campers that are there and potentially who they're from. In terms of who we if we have the ability to restrict certain people, we'd have to confirm that. I'm not sure we have the legal right to do so, but again, there might be some ways that we can do to manage it. And the reservation process is a good example to say no drop-ins if it's only the reserved sites, and the only ones that are open are ones that are reserved at that time. And then so the other reason for obviously wanting to bring a report back to council to get an idea of what we can and can't do and get some further guidance from council.
So any other questions? Very well. Moving on to the mayor's discretionary charges reports. Last page, those are my charges previous to the pandemic. Are there any questions on those? Very well. I'll ask for a motion to adjourn. Oh, Mr. Barry?
Just in terms of a budget process. So next steps. So obviously we've gone through all the departments based on any of the amendments throughout the process here, and of course the amended budget that occurred today with the rec facility. What we'll do for Friday's meeting is have council review the I'll call it the big picture, basically the full picture, the summary of all the departments, which would be the full tax levy required. And then we'll also provide the sample properties and the tax rates and things like that for council review and discussion on Friday, and then we can wrap up the process. Next week, it'll be financial statements. That'll be some point next week, either the Tuesday or Friday meeting to go through the financial statements as required. So, but for Friday, it'll be to look at the, for those of you on the tab, I should have this ready, but I don't, unfortunately. The beginning of the document. It's the folded sheet that shows you the full picture of the under tab 1. Go figure. Which would be the full annual budget. So we'll have that for you, which will give all the any of the impacts that decisions that council's made here regarding lease reductions, changes to the rec facility, et cetera. It'll show what that change would be, what it looks like, and then of course updated sample properties, which will also include the impacts that the province has communicated relating to the school tax changes.
And on the agenda for Friday, we're also going to be discussing about reducing the number of meetings per week.
If council wishes, yes. I mean, it's something that we want to discuss. I just threw it out today, just as we get through this budget process. It might be an opportunity that council looks at reducing that now that the budget stuff's behind us, and we have a bit of a, I'll call it a bit of a flow of information with our EOC, our operations center, emergency operations center, from our organizational structure in place and working relatively efficiently now. So just something for council to consider if they wish.
Councilors, you want to discuss this now? Would you like to wait till Friday? We'll discuss future meetings on and how they unfold, whether we want to go to a 1 meeting a week, or would you like to discuss that now? Councilor Roper.
I would like a few days to consider it and discuss it on Friday.
Very well. We'll throw that on the agenda for Friday if there's no other objections. And on that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Sorry, if I could just
go ahead.
I'm just wondering if perhaps I missed it because I was so tardy getting in on this meeting here, but I'm just wondering about the Musqueam River. Was there any update given on that at the beginning of the meeting, or?
There was, Councillor Penny. I can give you a call if you wish and communicate what was updated to council if that works for you.
Sure, yep.
Motion to
I'll make a motion
adjourn.
to adjourn then.
Moved by Counselor Penny, seconded by Counselor Andrews. All those in favor? We are adjourned. Thank you.